Hello and welcome to another edition of Fide's podcast. My name is Jerry Serino and I'm your host, and I'm here with talent on loan from Rush. You, hopefully, if you're an avid listener of my show, you heard the episode I had with Annabella Rockwell, and she talked about how she went away to school, and a very elite, expensive school, and went from being a happy, positive young woman to be, quite frankly, indoctrinated by the left in this country, and she had to come out of it. And she shared her story. If you haven't heard that episode, please go and listen. Annabella has a great story. My guest today is Beth Pensky. Beth has a similar type story, only from the perspective of a mom, of a parent in this case. And I wanted to have her on to tell her story and get her experience, because this is a serious, serious issue. We're here in Ohio, and at least me. And we have in Ohio have passed some laws demanding fairness. Quite frankly, is a quick way to say it, in regards to our higher education, to keep the liberal indoctrination and intimidation away from our students. So anyway, so here is Beth Pensky. Beth, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Jerry. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. So let's get right into it, and tell us your story, and what is going on or has been going on with your children.
Sure. So I am currently residing in Florida. I've been here for about 6 years. I moved here while my children were in college. They went to college in Massachusetts. One of them basically around the corner from where Annabella went. So when I had gotten word of her story, and it was through one of my clients, knowing my story, they said, "Have you read this, individual whose mom got a deprogrammer and also went to school in Massachusetts?" And it was a huge awakening just in the article, in the New York
Hmm.
Post. And then at that moment, after I finished reading the article, I said, "Oh my God," like it just made the connection. Like, this is what happened to my kids. I had suspicion all along that it had to do with what was going on in college, because that's pretty much when our relationship went south. But I also thought it was because I moved to Florida while they were still up there, and maybe they were harboring ill will, even though they gave me their blessing to do so. I
Hmm.
was just thinking maybe it was just being so far away, kind of out of sight, out of mind, even, as close as we were. But then after listening, and reading her story and then connecting to her, because I urgently went every single avenue I could to get a hold of her, um, it made sense. And then through the process of doing all the research that I've been doing ever since, and that's now going on about a year, it's just brought a lot of things to light of what's happened to my children,
Hmm.
along with a ton.
So
Yeah,
you have two children that are in this situation, correct?
correct, correct.
Okay, and
So
they're in
my
what
daughter
grades?
is so my daughter's now 27 and my son is 25. So they've
Okay.
since graduated from college. Um, I think it's, you know, growing up, I always believed education being key. Like, in order to succeed in life, you have to have a great education. So I made sure that my children that was their top priority. So going
Hmm.
throughout grade school, going through, high school, they went to public school, but they were at the top of their class. They were going into schools that they had to be tested into, even though it was public, it was national, in magnet programs. I want my kids to succeed, and thankfully they were smart enough to do so. So I expected them Ivy League. They didn't want Ivy League. They already felt the pressure as it was in the schools that they were in, and they were like, we maybe sub Ivy, but Ivy is just a
Yeah.
little bit too much. So
Mm.
my daughter wound up going to UMass Amherst after a little bout at Drexel, and then my son wound up going to Northeastern. So my son, second in line in his graduate class, and my daughter was 2000. So these were highly educated, highly smart children. Um, when they went off to college, if I would have known then what I know now, I would have picked a different location. And I'm just thinking they're going to be so far away as it was, because I was in New Jersey at the time. I wanted to be in a place that I'm going to feel safe and they're going to feel safe. So they're going to gain independence. They're going to, you know, be the adults that they should be and really make a name for themselves. And,
So
you know,
I was going to say, so okay, so prior to going to college, obviously they were very intelligent and very academically minded, good grades. What was their? Did they have a you know, I don't want to use the word political because kids probably aren't all that political, but did they have a, somewhat of a, you know, let's say conservative or liberal upbringing? Were you guys neutral? Did they ever express any thoughts or opinions about maybe past elections that maybe they were when they were in high school?
So, like what Annabella was saying, like, you know, hers was entering into 2011. So my daughter's not too far behind from her. So they were entering colleges around the same time frame. The agenda that they have out now is not like it was then. It was just kind of starting, like when they were in junior high school and high school. So,
Mhm.
you know, some of the things that they came home with that were just suspicious, not, you know, not really understanding why it was coming out the way they would say things like, you know, why are these not gender neutral bathrooms when we go into restaurants? Or, you know, Trump is just an awful human being. Or, you know, why is it, you know, that we are not equal in when we get jobs, when we would actually get careers? Why is it we're not equal pay? Or just kind of things that were, you know, they're just asking questions. But okay, but growing up, it was I I had a grandfather who lived in Miami Beach, and he was in the Chamber of Commerce, and he worked the elections every single year. So growing up, I used to hear all the time about how crooked the elections were, how there were always ballots missing, how there were always, you know, miscounts. So he was not fond of our system. And that was kind
Mhm.
of the way I grew up. My parents were Democratic, but, you know, they would vote and that would be about it. You didn't really speak about politics in a household. It wasn't that way.
Mhm.
You know, growing up in New York, that's the majority up there. So um, when I started raising my children, when it was 9/11, and they were really small at the time. They were like 3 and 5 at the time. When it happened, I was really, really scared of why it happened. And I had a coworker who started doing a lot of investigation on his own, who kind of woke me up to think maybe something is a little bit more to it. So doing my own investigation and going through a bunch of research and understanding maybe what have possibly happened could have been, you know, suspiciously by our government, I really put a stop to thinking about belief in our government, more untrusting of our government. And I didn't push that to my kids, but what I did is I always said, you know, question everything,
Mhm.
um, do your own research. Don't just go along with what people tell you is true. Go ahead and do it yourself. Research. They're smart kids. So around that time frame, you know, my daughter was doing a ton of research that, you know, would scare her to the point of she'd be like, telling me things like, Mom, do you know about MK Ultra and what happened in World War II and all this other stuff? And I'm like, no, tell me what's going on. She goes, it's just mind boggling. So we really were awakened at that time to, you know,
Mhm.
things that were happening that were not on the up and up with our government.
Yeah.
So knowing that and going into school and being as independent minded as they were, I was thinking, okay, you know, they're just going to grow from there. Did not
Mhm.
realize how heavily focused it would be and bullied into that they'd have to believe a certain way or they would not succeed.
So what were the first signs? Obviously, they go in as young freshmen. Just I'm dealing with that now. We just took my one son to a freshman year. We have a junior and a sophomore, and so we get it. There's nerves. They're meeting their roommate, and need to figure out where to go for their class and stuff. And I've seen maturity come from my kids as they've experienced college because of the independence and stuff. What were some signs you saw, and how early on was it that they were, I guess, being indoctrinated or having a different line of thinking?
So the majority would be when I was down here and they would come for visits. And it was you know, they would point out if they saw a Confederate thing on someone's license plate. And then it would be like an all-encompassing. You know, it's if one license plate had a Confederate thing, then it's all of Florida is just evil. Be careful.
Hmm.
And um, you know, the LGBTQ clubs at colleges, and my daughter trying to fit into a group and felt the most comfortable there, uh, and the most welcomed there. But it was, that's when pronoun games started happening. And it was, I
Mhm.
have a they friend. And I went, being as smart as you are, grammatically, does that make sense? And, it was, Mom, you're just not understanding things. So a lot of the arguments would start to ensue. Um, they would send me, certain documents about things that would be happening with the governor or something in Florida. They would say things like, my daughter would say, you're just being surrounded by a bunch of white supremacists down there. You got to watch out. And knowing how I raised them, for those words to come out of their mouth towards me was beyond suspicious, and didn't raise my kids to be any type of racist. They had an abundance of friends in every shape or form. So to have, those kind of remarks being said towards me just because of where I lived was definitely where it started.
Yeah. And so was this did you get a perspective as to whether or not this pressure was coming from more from the students, or was it also coming from, cuz peer pressure is a real thing. It's not an excuse, cuz they are intelligent kids, it sounds like, but were the professors pushing at this stuff?
Yeah, so I had made mention in a couple of the other interviews that I have done that, again, I had 100% trust in my children. I didn't need to not have trust in them. So they didn't get in trouble as kids. These were kids that just had a focus in doing right and being good. So their thing, again, being education, a couple of times when my daughter was in college, she'd be like, Mom, do me a favor. I'm going to send you this paper, and I just want you to just, check grammar. I just want to make sure it sounds right. And I was just literally looking for grammar. Like, you should put an S over here, or that's a run on sentence or something like that. And going back and looking at them, there was, in her freshman year, her sophomore year, her history teacher giving her papers that said, why are blacks portrayed poorly in the media? Or why is uh, the by uh, actors and actresses not portrayed enough in media? Um,
Mhm.
and certain topics. And I'd be like, now I'm looking at it and I'm going, wait a second. This is a history professor giving this rubric to her in freshman and sophomore year. Where's the history in that?
Mhm.
And I see it now, obviously, but back then I'm just thinking, yeah, I'm just going to look for grammar. I'm not going to think anything. But when I look back and see how much reading and how much research that she had to document in her bibliography on what she had to do to get those papers, I mean, there are things in there that I'm just like, I can't even believe that she would have actually had to do that kind of research and read those kind of things.
Crazy. Yeah, that's crazy. And again, it's, if a professor wants to have that perspective, they should keep it to themselves. They're welcome to do it. And or if they want to discuss a topic like that, then allow people to take either side and present both of the sides. Because I think what happens is, look, let's face it. I mean, your kids at that age and my kids at their age currently in college are way smarter than I ever was. I'll admit it.
Mhm.
But at that age, you're naive. You're still immature, insecure. You don't have the perspective of life. And when you have the people in your life, your fellow students, your professors who you look up to, telling you things, it becomes just becomes almost like, well, this is the truth, right?
Correct.
And they don't know any other way. So how did things progress? I mean, how was your relationship from as the years went on?
I mean, poor. It started really getting poor. I just recently became alert from Annabella's mom connecting me with another mom who's been estranged. And she said, do you know about this Facebook group? And it's for estranged moms. And since then, I've now, in the last couple of weeks, found several groups. And it seems that a majority, I kind of put a few comments out there, a few posts to see what I would get. And it seems the majority of the parents, like myself, never knew a reason why. They just were estranged. And it happened with my son. My daughter gave a little bit more insight to just being so angry, and everything was, her being a victim, that it became not my child anymore, and I just couldn't see it. I couldn't have any conversations. Everything, because she was a psych major, that's where I thought the link was, but it wasn't. But I just thought there was just every conversation it was, I have to put up boundaries, and that's a trigger, and you're gaslighting and all these things. And I'm like, we can't even have a conversation if it's not about like cooking. Who are you? Like, that's not my child. I'm a single mom. Like, 24/7 for 18 years of your life, like, doesn't make sense. And with my son, as with the majority of these comments that were on the group pages, where you didn't even get an answer, they just stopped talking to you. And that's basically what happened with my son. It was, again, I wanted to make sure that they were safe up there, so I'd get a good morning and a good evening text. And I asked that for them. If I'm going to be moving 2,000 miles away, I want a good morning and a good night, just so I know you're safe every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about 3 days that had passed. He was in his freshman year, his freshman year, and I didn't hear from him. And I said, listen, I'm getting nervous. I haven't heard from you. It's been 3 days. Before I call the cops, please let me know you're okay. And within a few hours, he contacted me and he said, I can't believe you're going to call the cops on me. I'm fine. I'm busy. I'll call you when I can. And I'm like, whoa, like, that's not my kid. That,
Mm-hmm.
respect on both ends of us. And never would that come out of him. And at that point, I was just like, I can't believe you're talking to me this way. Like, I'm just checking to make sure. I didn't say I was calling the cops on you. I'm calling the
Mm-hmm.
cops. I don't know if you're living.
Right.
And it was at that point he stopped talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's been 5 years now. And it's been 2 years with my daughter.
Wow. And it's
Yeah.
so hard. And I always try to put my mind, put myself in their shoes. And I don't mean to put myself in their shoes to understand from a justification standpoint, but if you think about what they've been taught and what they ultimately believe, that people like you and I and anyone else are literally Hitler, right?
Correct.
In their minds, we
Correct.
are literally as evil as you can get. And so I think what happens, and even if it's not a case where they stop talking to you, even if it's just, they're less involved in your life or they respect you less, they still think of you as a white supremacist. But in reality, they've been so lied to by the very people that they're trusting.
Correct.
What does a parent do? I mean, in your situation.
So that's where I'm at right now. I refuse to be victimized. I refuse to have this happen to me. And it's been years. And I never went without hours without talking to my kids. And it's been years. And at the beginning, when it happened, people would just say, just pray, and being a religious person, okay, I'll pray. But it's come to the point of going, I don't think God would just want me to sit and just pray. There has to be some kind of action that has to be taken. And knowing that it's not just me that it's happening to, that there's thousands of people that it's happening to. If it's just me, okay, maybe I was the worst mother on the planet that I didn't realize. Maybe I'm living another ulterior, alternate universe. But it's happening to thousands, and it's happening now even younger, where they're brainwashing children. And if you think about something happening every single day in that child's mind while a mind is forming, and they're being told every single day, America's bad, God, don't believe in God, your parents are evil, they don't trust them, trust us. If that's brainwashing into you every single day from kindergarten on up, and in college, it being so much more worse because they have so much more control, because they're in front of your face every single day, grading you if they don't like what you say or believe, pushing other friends and other peers to push you in that direction so that you're not ostracized, which my kids definitely did not want to be ostracized. They wanted to fit and belong. It's only going to melt in that direction. So it's at this point that you can't anymore sit back and just do nothing and just go, which a lot of parents I see going, I mean, I'll just sit and pray and hope that God will bring them back. I refuse to do that anymore. I
Mhm.
tried 2 years ago to go up and try and make amends and see what I can do. And I put that in my post in the Epic Times, and it worked out, unfortunately, very poorly. But I'm not willing to give up and just go, that's it, because these are my kids. And if you had kids that were taken from an occult, into a cult and abducted, you wouldn't just go, eventually they'll come around and I'll just pray it and hopefully they'll do it. No, you're going to take action. So at this point, we need to band together. We need to get our kids back. Praying is wonderful, absolutely, but God would want us to act. So somehow,
Mhm.
some way, with Annabella talking to me, there's connections that you can put into your kids by, old coaches, old family friends,
Mhm.
someone that they can stay connected to. So that hopefully that brainwashing could get out of their mind and they can reconnect to the person that they used to be, so
Mhm.
that then there can be an amends with family. So I'm working on that currently to try and see what I can do to get them to get out of the trance that they've been in for the last couple of years.
Yeah. It's so hard, and we're all hoping and praying for you to be able to do this. And I think your point about, we're talking about college kids, is what we have seen just in the last few years is what is being done at the kindergarten level, right?
Yes.
With all sorts of things, whether it's what teachers are saying about gender,
Yeah.
where they're hiding kids that they're claiming they're transitioning, or they tell them, hey, you don't really know if you're a boy or a girl yet. And there's so much more that's going on, and you're talking about a child. If they grow
Right.
up and they know nothing different, then
Um,
their hope, it's almost hopeless, and it is a cult. I like the way you called it a cult, because it really truly is.
One that introduced me to Annabella, my client, the reason that he started talking to me about it is because he has little ones that are going into pre-K and kindergarten. So he was looking schools, including schools in the area, that would not be woke. And he was specifically interviewing them. And that's when I started
Mm.
talking to him about my kids being, indoctrinated in college. So he's looking for his little ones. Even in Catholic schools in the area, you have to be really careful of where you're sending your children and interview the administration there. And if not,
Yep.
homeschool also a great idea.
Mhm. Yeah, you have to be diligent. I mean, whether it's taking action like you just talked about, or we're seeing, my sister is running for school board, and this is, in her city, this is the types of things, the reasons why she wants to get involved in so many others. So even if you're not, in desire of running for office or something, supporting those that are, or whatever you can do, go to a school board meeting, fighting against these professors, even in college, even though our kids are adults in college. Yeah, you're right. We can't, praying is definitely good, and keep doing it, but we have to take action. Absolutely, for sure. So, well, Beth Pensky, if you're watching, you see underneath her name, she describes herself as the warrior mom. That's what you have to be, and you never want to mess with a warrior mom. That's for sure. So, Beth Pensky, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. And I'm hoping that at some point there's a positive conclusion.
Thank you. I pray every day, and I appreciate that and hope to God that all of us will be reconnected with our children.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. And thank all of you for listening to this episode of Fide's podcast. Please check out all my podcasts and all the different podcast apps on YouTube, on Rumble, on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on rightamericamedia.com, and on WHK radio /podcast.com. So thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time.